Well, welcome to the Wesley Show. I'm sure a lot of you are pretty concerned about Joseph and his predicament being in prison. But before we get to the rest of the part two, just wanted to let you know something pretty exciting about the Wesley Show. We're gonna have a guest, a real esteemed guest. Jake Ramsey is going to be with us, and I just hope you'll tune in for that interview, which I think will be very uplifting and upbuilding later this week. But now, back to Joseph. Well, here we are. Joseph is in jail, as we recall. He's been falsely accused. But something really important to remember is that throughout this story, the Bible tells us that God was with Joseph. So even when he was in the pit, even though he was in the house of Potiphar, and now even when he's in jail, we hear the Bible tells us God is with him. And we see that in that the jailer trusts Joseph, and he's put in charge of many things. And then there are two men in jail who both have dreams that Joseph is able to interpret correctly. Eventually, one of those men is released and is waiting on Pharaoh. And so happens Pharaoh has some dreams that he doesn't understand. And he mentions it to the cupbearer, this man who is freed. I don't know what these dreams mean, and none of my magicians or priestly people can tell me what it means. What am I going to do? And the cupbearer reminded him that he knew somebody in prison whose name was Joseph who could help him. So Joseph comes to the Pharaoh, and he is able to interpret the dreams. They mean that Egypt is going to go through a time of great productivity, and they're going to have lots of grain, and that's going to be followed by a famine, which is a time when there's no food at all. Well, the result of Joseph's being able to predict these dreams, and he credits God with his ability, is Pharaoh puts him over the whole enterprise. Everything's going along swimmingly. Comes the 7 years of plenty, and then the 7 years of famine begin. At which point, way up in Canaan, where Joseph's brothers were, the ones who threw him in the pit and sold him into slavery, they are experiencing famine. So they go down to Egypt to try and buy some food. Oh my gosh, they're going to Egypt? They're going to come straight into contact with Joseph. I mean, this is a pretty serious situation here. This is like a climax. Well, so they do. They come into Joseph's presence, but of course, he now looks like an Egyptian. He's wearing an Egyptian headdress. His hair is, styled like an Egyptian, probably wearing some of that makeup, and they don't even recognize him. But he recognizes them. He gives them some grain. He sends them back home. But he asks them a question. He says, do you all have anybody else in your family? And he asked them this question because Joseph had a younger brother named Benjamin. And they say, yes, funny you should ask, we do. His name is Benjamin. And Joseph says, well, if you come back, don't come back without Benjamin. So what happens next? They go back, they bring the grain, they see the father, they see Benjamin. Well, what happens next is that they eventually run out of grain, so they have to go back to Egypt, and so they have to bring Benjamin with them. So they come back, and they come before Joseph, and Joseph is so happy to see Benjamin. And he gives them dinner, and he gives them grain, but then he hides a silver cup in Benjamin's bag. So they leave, and then Joseph sends his guards to go chase them. And when the guards go find the brothers and Benjamin and they open all the sacks, they say, somebody's stolen something. Oh my goodness, Benjamin, you have stolen Joseph's silver cup. Marjorie, that's bad. I mean, I thought Joseph was the good guy and he framed Benjamin. That's exactly what Potiphar's wife did to him. I mean, that's not good. I mean, I thought we were supposed to like Joseph. Wesley, very good point. It's really important when we read the Old Testament especially, there is only one person who is the hero, who always gets it right. Who is that? That is God. God is the only hero in the Old Testament. All those other good guys, you know, Abraham, Jacob, Moses, Joseph, they get it wrong. Often they get it wrong, even though they're good guys. The only one that we would ever want to copy is Jesus, who is God. But that's important when we read the Bible and we interpret it, because some people say, oh, we should be just like Joseph. Well, we wouldn't want to be Joseph in this situation, hiding stolen goods in other people's bags. That would be terrible. So what happens next? Well, they all come back. Benjamin, the brothers, they're all quite upset, as you can imagine, because they're found guilty of something they haven't done. And Joseph says to them, don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed, he says. What you did when you put me in that pit and sold me as a slave, you did it for ill. You did it for bad reasons. But God meant it for good. He says this, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. Wow. So even though his brothers did a very bad thing, Joseph could see how God used it, you know, so he could, you know, build those storehouses and save up the grain for people when there was the famine, and so he wasn't so angry with his brothers, because he could see how God was even bigger than his brothers and had like a bigger plan that was actually good. Yes, exactly. God was with Joseph all along. God used Joseph in an amazing, mysterious way to preserve life. And Joseph, by being faithful to God, ended up saving many, many lives. Don't forget to join us later this week for Jake Ramsey, our special guest.